Hello, and welcome back to TimeSplitters in Detail. In this video, we'll be taking an in-depth look at Chicago. As usual, we'll be looking to uncover any hidden secrets this level has, explore the environment in full, and see what makes this level tick. So let's dive in. Chicago begins at the docks. The player starts in an elevated position, tucked away in a small building. As you make your way outside, the level opens up, showing off its moving trams and a large blimp looming in the skyline. You certainly get the impression this is a busy level with lots going on. Here's a top-down view of the starting location. You'll notice most buildings have missing roofs and textures at this angle. As you'd normally never see them from this height, those details weren't necessary. As we get higher, you can see how the buildings are placed in the background, giving the illusion of a full city. These buildings are in fact partially solid, so they can be shot. At the start of a level is a boat which the player drops down onto. Taking a closer look reveals the boat isn't fully rendered, though this isn't surprising as you'd normally never see it in full. The water at the docks here appears to be more of a translucent texture, rather than animated actual water. As it's the only part of the map to feature a water section, it's not overly important. If we pass through the barrier, you're able to walk on the surface rather than falling through. I was definitely interested to see how the trams work in Chicago. They're normally always at a distance from the player, but here we can get up close and take a good look. You can see the trams moving from the right to left side simply clip through the wall, then disappear. There is a bend in the tunnel they go through, though judging by the textures here, it's just to fill space. On the other side, however, the trams will turn properly following the tunnel, then disappear. Usually in TimeSplitters games, when an object, such as a vehicle, reaches the end of its movement path, it will be teleported back to the start and continue on in an endless loop. This was apparent with other objects, as shooting them would leave bullet holes that would remain in place. But unusually, with the trams here, they appear to be new entities rather than the same object on a loop. You can see, as the tram passes me again, the bullet holes have now disappeared. If we freeze the trams in place, we can get a good look at the model. Judging by the textures, it appears there could be a driver at the front here, but it's pretty hard to tell. The inside of the trams are completely hollow. We'll take a look at the other trams as we make our way through the level. I was obviously very keen to get a good look at the blimp, flying above the player. I could be completely wrong, but I get the impression, whilst the blimp follows a simple path, it might sort of lock on to the player's location. This is something I noticed whilst playing Streets, where the jet seemed to take my location into account. The blimp is actually pretty high up, but now we're here we can take a good look at the model. We can see here that the blimp is hollow on the inside and missing the top section. There's a small cabin beneath the blimp which I noticed only renders correctly at one side. Here's a quick, sped up look at the blimp's flight path. As I've frozen it in place several times, if it does indeed lock onto the player's location, it will be a little off. There isn't a great deal to see inside the warehouse connecting the docks to the streets, though I did take a look inside the whiskey barrels you can destroy. As expected, there's nothing inside. As we make our way to the city streets, there are a few things worth looking at. When playing on hard mode, there's a room below the tram tracks where a sniper waits to ambush you. Whilst it's not terribly exciting, we can check out the room which is in. Out of curiosity, I thought I'd take a peek over the wall here, but as expected, there's nothing of interest. Here is the tunnel which Tony's brother's car will escape down if you don't destroy it in time. There's an invisible wall here, but if we bypass it we can explore the tunnel. As you can see, it's fairly long and simply ends with a brick wall. Not long after making your way down the road, Tony's brother will make an escape in his car. We can get a good look at where it spawns. Taking a look at the model, we can see the driver, who appears to look a little similar to Louis Big Nose. We can also see what happens to the car if we let it escape. As expected, it simply vanishes as it makes its way to the end of the tunnel. Destroying the car will cause it to lose a wheel. It will always crash in the same location, next to two fire hydrants which conveniently burst to provide a water source for the player as the car goes up in flames. I always thought it was possible to be set on fire here, and I imagined the fire hydrants were there to put the player out, but it seems the car doesn't affect the player. I noticed whenever I approached this corner that an NPC would spawn, and usually a second one too out of nowhere. I decided to follow the path they take. It seems they are on a set loop, but can sometimes switch to another route, taking them further through the level. I started to notice if I wasn't directly looking at an NPC, they could respawn in a new location. Chicago uses three characters for its civilians: the lawyer, the accountant, and the consultant. The lawyer and accountant are both unlockable characters for arcade mode. though for some reason the consultant was never made a playable character. Before making our way to O'Leary's pub, you can sort of catch a glimpse of what appears to be a room just above here. Due to the angle, it wouldn't make much sense to place an enemy here, but by making our way up to this room, it turns out to be a solid working area. Whilst it's pretty insignificant, I do wonder if perhaps a sniper was supposed to be placed here, but perhaps the level layout just didn't work. The building, which the mobster's car bursts out from, features a smokestack at its top, which we can get a closer look at. So, we've finally made it to O'Leary's. Depending on when you get here, you can find NPCs hanging around. There's a working cash register and some interestingly named alcohol here. When you make your way to the pool room, you'll come under attack, though the enemies will initially target the civilians over the player. A cool feature is the pool table here can actually be used, and has some basic physics. It seems when a ball is pocketed, it simply disappears. The balls will move further, or even fly off the table depending on the weapon you use. The red actually flew off the table and across the room. I was tempted to try and take it out the pub and through the level with me, but I think I'd be here all day. Just across from where you meet Marco the Snitch is another unused room. I was surprised this wasn't used as a sniper spot for hard mode, as it would easily catch a player off guard. The room is solid with working windows. Before we meet up with Marco, let's just take a quick look at the trams you can see in this section. You can see this section is very bare bones, but it's normally viewed from a distance. Okay, so we've got up to Marco and we've got to escort him to the safe house. I thought perhaps Marco would have different health stats depending on the difficulty mode, but on both easy and hard the figure was around 3.8. The main difference for this section between difficulty modes are the number of enemies that spawn to attack you, as well as more stationary enemies on normal and hard mode. Another major difference between difficulty levels is at the end of this section, on normal and hard mode, you're given TNT. The TNT is used to blow up a safe, which provides you with the Sunrise Club Pass. On easy mode, however, rather than TNT, the Club Pass is on the table instead.
Take the pass on the table, it'll get you inside the Sunrise Club, and the rest is up to you.
We can also see Marco disappears into the darkness here. The building containing Tony's safe is blocked off on easy mode, but we can take a look inside by bypassing the wall. Unlike normal and hard mode, there are no enemies or items in the building, though the phone in the top office functions as normal and can be used to order a taxi. On all difficulty modes, you can't order a taxi until you've obtained the Sunrise Club Pass. As mentioned before, on normal and hard mode, you obtain the pass by blowing up this safe. Taking a quick peek inside reveals the pass isn't in there, and it spawns once the safe is blown up. After you've obtained the pass, several enemies will be waiting in inaccessible rooms looking to ambush you. Here's a quick look at some of those locations. As you can see, these areas are just tiny rooms, big enough to contain the enemy snipers. We can also get a look at the Felucci Bros barrel, which an enemy spawns next to. As with a lot of objects which are higher up in this level, the barrel is not a complete model. Once again, we have another tiny room, though this time when I enter it, the room stops rendering. Once you've obtained the Sunrise Club Pass, it becomes possible to order a taxi from any of the phones in the level. The phone you use determines the location for where the taxi will spawn. So using the telephone at the start of the level will cause a taxi to spawn in the tunnel where the mob car tries to escape. We can see the exact location this taxi spawns. Using the phone from Tony's office, the phone outside the apartments, and the other two close to the Sunrise Club will cause the taxi to spawn near the newsstand where you meet Marco, instead of the tunnel.
We'll send you a taxi, sir.
Regardless of where the taxi spawns, it will always do a trip to the Sunrise Club, and then make its way back to the start of a level, exiting through the tunnel where it will then disappear. An amusing detail in the level are the clothes on the washing line here. They can be shot and will spin depending on the power of the weapon used. As expected, the less powerful weapons don't do much, whereas the shotgun packs a wallop. Surprisingly though, it seems the most powerful weapons are the fists, which seem to be about on par with the TNT. Before you make your way to the entrance of the Sunrise Club, there are a few more inaccessible enemy locations. Whilst the rooms in the bottom here are empty, they are solid and would function perfectly for enemies. At the end of both streets here are two other inaccessible rooms, one containing a sniper. We can take a better look at the fancy hotel building on this street, as well as the other surrounding buildings. I never knew there was actually a clock on top of the hotel, though the texture is pretty poor. Once again, we can see the buildings here don't have a top. The last set of trams are also in this area, so let's get a quick look. The tunnel for this section here is actually closed, rather than stretched to make a bend. Okay, so it's time to finally make our way into the Sunrise Club. An alternative method to enter that doesn't require the taxi is to alert the guards standing outside the restaurant. They'll open the gate in order to pursue the player. Here's a quick top-down view of the entrance area for the restaurant. Taking a look at the pillar in the centre shows it's hollow from the top down. The restaurant part of the level feels very small, just a minor room with some tables and chairs. The boxing photographs are a nice touch at least. Besides the corridor leading to the club, there are no other areas for the restaurant. Before you go through the members' door, there is a small outside section to the left. There's nothing there, but it's still interesting to explore. Here's a quick, higher viewpoint of the entrance area for the club. Well, it's been a long journey, but we're inside the Sunrise Club at last. It's interesting, as we're essentially entering another level entirely in a way, as this section is identical to the nightclub arcade level. There's some trickery going on underneath the floor here. To achieve that reflective look, the level is mirrored vertically, and the floor is actually a see-through texture. As you enter the fight against Big Tony, he approaches from the stairs on the right hand side. We can take a look at the boss room and how the enemies spawn. Depending on the difficulty level, you may have to deal with a few Scourge Splitters too. I'd always been curious as to whether or not the nightclub level was hidden away behind these doors, but sadly, it isn't. It's not surprising considering how giant the level would become. If we go past the bars on the window here, it reveals just a small portion of the nightclub level. Once again, the door here has nothing behind it. Normally, when I play through TimeSplitters, I would always fight Tony in the main room, but I was curious to see if he'd followed me out of the club. Well, it turns out Tony will follow you through the whole level, so I decided to give him a bit of exercise and gave him the runaround. During the boss fight and after killing Big Tony, a Scourge Splitter will continuously spawn in the main room of the club and relentlessly hunt down the player. I was interested to know if Tony's health differed between difficulty levels, and it does. On easy mode he has 15, on normal it's 25, and hard mode is 35. Now I realise those figures are a bit meaningless, so to put it in perspective, on easy mode, Hatchet Sal here has 1 health, and the Silence Luger does approximately 0.4 damage to him. The same is true of other enemies you encounter around the starting location. The car has around 2.5 health on easy mode. As the difficulty increases, so does the enemy's health, and usually boss health. With that out of the way, we've pretty much wrapped up the important parts of story mode. Anything I've missed, I'll make sure to include in an episode of TimeSplitters Extra. Although story is out of the way, we're still not done with Chicago, as it features in the challenge mode section of the game. Chicago appears in the infiltration level, Trouble at the Docks, and I wanted to see what differences there were in this version of the level. Now, I'd just like to say, in order to do this, I've had to disable the timer, lock my point score, and also force the game into a state where even if I win the level, it will let me remain inside it. Because of this, there are a few glitches with the AI. I absolutely had to show off this glitching hat. As I explore the level, you'll notice that a lot of props and objects are missing. I'll try and do a quick, thorough level sweep. I did try using the telephone box over there, but sadly it doesn't work. Some notable missing objects are the trams and blimp, telephone boxes and fire hydrants, and sadly the pool table is even missing. Strangely, despite there being nothing in Tony's office, the sound of the desk fan can still be heard. The other challenge Chicago features in is from the Cutout Shootout series level, Fallout. We'll be taking a look at this version too. Without trying to spoil things too much, Fallout is very similar to Trouble at the Docks. with most normal objects being removed. As with the previous challenge, I've frozen the timer and points, as well as forcing the game to remain after the endpoint. Obviously, there are a ton of new objects scattered about for the actual challenge, and a few areas have been made inaccessible. The apartment building with Tony's office was identical to Trouble at the Docks. The level differs the most towards the starting area, and has been completely stripped of objects. As Trouble at the Docks required the starting section of the map, in that challenge it was mostly intact. Here you can see the boat is empty. I guess all the containers have been left in the streets. And, with that, marks the end of the episode. It's certainly been a long one, and I'm sure there are still some hidden bits and pieces lurking within Chicago. As mentioned before, I'll be happy to revisit this level in the future if needed. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.